Hello, today I'd like you to start with thinking about this statement here in the middle of the slide. Is crime a bad thing for society? And I'd just like you to spend some time thinking for yourself. On the one hand, yes, it is a bad thing for society because, and then some of the reasons that you think crime is a bad thing. And then, no, crime can be good for society because, and think of some of the reasons it is a good thing. So what I want you to be thinking about is those two sides of that question. Is crime a bad thing for society? Spend about 5 minutes or so just having a think about that, and then your answers we will use later on in the lesson. The title for today's lesson then is what is the functionalist view towards crime? So we're going back now to looking at our different theories, and you can see there we've got Emil Durkheim, our founding sociology father, our main man when we look at functionalism, and he says we don't condemn it because it is a crime, but it is a crime because we condemn it. So that goes back to the things we were talking about at the beginning of this unit, looking at crime as a social construct. Society decides what is a crime and how they're going to respond to it. So today we're going to look at that functionalist view. We're going to try and remind ourselves what functionalists believe in general. Then we're going to explain the functionalist view towards crime, looking at some of the key vocabulary that we need to use. And then we're going to decide if what they say is correct or indeed where it can be challenged. So some knowledge first of all. So to remind ourselves, first of all, we've got our human body down there. We know that we've got the norms and the values that bind society together, like the skin binds together the human body. And we know that functionalists believe that society works like the human body. So everything is interacting with each other, everything is positive, everything is needed. So the different aspects of society, like education, like the media, like religion, like the family, act the same way as heart, lungs, brain, kidneys, and so on to make the whole, the human body or society, work. So it's a consensus theory, if you remember. We've talked about those phrases before. So let's just read this little bit here. It's consensus theory. They argue that society is similar to a human body in that parts need to work together to contribute to help society work. We just mentioned that. The family does this by teaching the norms and values through primary socialisation and keeping the adults happy. And schools do this by also teaching norms and values and by making sure that those who work the hardest are rewarded with the jobs they deserve. We've talked about that before, this idea of meritocracy. If you work hard, you'll be rewarded. So we've got a key word for your glossary now. So we've got the consensus theory, the idea that people in society share the same beliefs and norms. As a consensus, they agree. As opposed to, if you remember, a conflict theory, which would be the feminists or the Marxists, where groups are actually in conflict with each other. So in Marxism, just as a recap, we've got the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and in feminist, mainly we've got male and female. So just write that key word in there. You don't need to write these other bits because we've already talked about it in the past. We were just having a bit of a catch. As you might imagine, functionalists believe that crime has a function to play in society to keep it running. And there are some certain key words that they use to describe what these functions are. So we're going to look at these words a bit later on, but just so that you know them and you can keep your eye out for them, we've got collective sentiments, we've got social cohesion, we've got enemy. So these three key words help us explain what functionalists think about crime. So we'll look at those in a moment. You've got a worksheet attached to the Google Classroom that you need to be using in order to do the work that comes in a moment. So what I need you to do is I need you to draw out this worksheet. So there is a copy of the worksheet on the Google Classroom if you want, but you can also draw it out. So your book needs to be split into 4 sections with a sort of a longer box along the bottom, as you can see. And the 4 sections say crime is inevitable. So that's the red section, inevitable. In other words, what that means is it's going to happen anyway, regardless. Then we've got crime reaffirms boundaries. That's the purple bit. So in other words, it helps us learn what the boundaries are in society. The blue one is crime unites people. The yellow one is crime causes change, and change can be a good thing to move society forward and help it develop. And the bottom one is crime provides jobs. So either copy the worksheet if it's available to you, or make sure that you draw that table out. And then on the sheet that is attached, you're going to read the information on the sheet and fill in those boxes. That should all become quite clear when you read the sheet. So use the sheet that is attached to the lesson resources and fill in your table. You will need, I would say, a whole page to do your table. And then I want you to look at these statements. So we've got 3 key statements. So I want you to pick one of these statements and think about how you could challenge that statement. So how you could argue against that statement. And I want you to spend 5 minutes or so writing a paragraph as to why you would disagree with the statement. So the first statement, everyone in society unites together after a huge crime. So for example, terrorism. So if you think about the Ariana Grande concert at the Manchester Arena, for example, you might think about how that united society together in their sort of their shock and their horror and their support of each other, and nobody is left out. So that would be, functionalists would say, a positive about crime. What I want you to do is challenge why you disagree with that statement. Or everyone learns from the mistakes of other people when they commit a crime, so it doesn't happen again. Again, challenge that statement if that's the one that you pick to do so. And then thirdly, the police do a great job in keeping order on the streets and preventing crimes from occurring. Again, challenge that. So choose one of those 3 statements and just write below it, write it out so you've got it, and then write below it why you challenge that statement. Why do you believe that that is not true? Try to use some of the functionalism keywords that we talked about on the previous slide. So press pause, have a little go at both of those tasks. They're going to take you quite some time. That's the table. If you want to see it better or if you want to print out the PowerPoint slide, it's entirely up to you. So you've got the table there if you want it. And then finally, we need some criticisms of Durkheim. So I don't do this boom roasted. This is very much a Mr. Lapham way to finish the lesson, but I'm going to go with it even though I'm a boring old lady. So we've got some criticisms of Durkheim here. So first of all, some people will say that Durkheim and functionalists in general are really ignorant. They ignore that some crimes are harmful. They ignore the physical and mental effects on victims. So they say that is really ignorant, because actually how can you say that something is of value to society if they are people who are victims of it, who are facing their loved ones being murdered, for example. Then we've got that Durkheim and the functionalists are so assuming. In other words, they assume that all criminals are dealt with fairly and equally by the police and the courts. But Marxists and feminists would say that the powerless are picked on way more. So Marxists would say that the working class are picked on far more, and feminists would say that it is the women that are picked on way more. So both of those groups would say that it's not fair and it is not equal. Then we've got that Durkheim and the functionalists are just way too general. They generalise what they say. They say that crime is functional, but interactionalists would argue that every crime is different and needs to be viewed differently. You can't just have a conversation about crime and say that it's really beneficial, or it does this or it does that, because actually all crimes are different. And then we've got that Durkheim and functionalists are way too positive. They say that everyone follows the same norms and values. But actually, there's just too many cultures today to say that that is true. It isn't true to say that the norms and the values of our British white society are exactly what everybody follows. Because, of course, there are all cultures, there are all religions, there are people from all walks of life in, for example, the UK, in Great Britain, and they don't all have the same norms and values. So it is not okay to say that we all think and do and believe the same thing. So those are your criticisms, your evaluation, your boom roasted, as Mr. Lapham likes to say. I'm sure he could do that much better than me if he was doing this recording. But they are your criticisms of functionalism that you need to use when you're looking at challenging this viewpoint, particularly when we go on to look at some of the other theories in future lessons.